Welcome back to our channel, where we provide updates and exclusive insights on Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. We are pleased to announce the following news. Shocking! Prince George's most trusted confidant is gone, and the palace wasn't ready for his reaction. Prince George's most trusted confidant was his nanny, who suddenly found herself terminated from her job after nearly a decade crafting the personality of a future king. The nanny had been Prince George's most trusted confidant right from the get-go. But her exit was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a sly and smart move that took the palace by surprise. This maneuver was surprisingly successful in taking the palace by surprise. And now, for the first time, we learn the whole background behind the dismissal and what her subsequent behavior tells us about the uncertain fate of the present monarchy itself. This is a historic point in our history. In the hermetically enclosed universe of the British royal family, the rarest and most dangerous of currencies is true intimacy. This is because the realm of the royal family is hermetically enclosed. This is the culture we live in, a world of gilded cages and public performance, where every connection is measured against the uncompromising demands of the crown. But it is of the greatest importance that the child born under the bright light of the world's attention, the successor to that crown, have a place that actually provides protection on a regular basis. Prince George, at 8 months old, had someone special in mind when he sought refuge here. This woman's real name was Maria Teresa Turillon Borrallo. She was not just a babysitter. She was the architect of his inner universe, the custodian of his childhood, the one who was in charge of his upbringing. In a life that was supposed to be one of perpetual turmoil, she was the only thing that remained consistent. There were a few things that caused her to leave the heart of the Wales family unit so abruptly. One factor was the change in staffing levels. It was an earthquake, a meticulously administered but profoundly wrenching amputation of the most formative bond in the young prince's life. It was the end of his youth, the formal beginning of his initiation into the painful machinery of kingship. It was a terribly emotional severance, but it was also a very ordered severance. For the young prince, it meant an end to the connection that had been the most formative in his life up to then. The ghost of Norland, what it is. Before one can have a thorough knowledge of the significance of Maria Borrallo, it is necessary to first have an understanding of the organization that was responsible for her development. She's a graduate of Norland College, a prestigious institution, and when her name is mentioned in the corridors of world power, it is spoken of as the very pinnacle of childcare. Norland is not just a finishing school for nannies. It is a quasi-military academy that has been churning out the most qualified guardians for the children of aristocrats, oligarchs, and royals for over a century. Norland has been in existence for more than 100 years. Its recruits are schooled in developmental psychology and nutrition, but also in the intricacies of skid pan driving to escape paparazzi, cybersecurity to shield their charges from the internet, and self-defense techniques taught by former military intelligence agents. All of these abilities are taught by instructors with law enforcement backgrounds. These trainees are in their distinctive brown outfits, which are astonishingly out of date and almost ludicrously absurd. The one lesson must be ingrained into the mind of every graduate of Norland is that of absolute and unshakable discretion. They are to play the role of ghosts within the system, which means that they are there but not seen, and influential but not audible during the process. When the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, as they were then, went out looking for a nanny in the year 2014, they were navigating a minefield of historical precedent. More than anybody, Prince William was aware of the huge and often detrimental impact of a childhood in the royal family. He was more aware of their ramifications than anyone else. His own childhood was famously damaged, caught between the emotional remoteness of a father being groomed for kingship and the intense, often stormy love of a mother at war with the institution. This caused him to become emotionally distant from his father. It has been said that both they and Catherine were committed to interrupt that cycle in their efforts to do so. They looked for someone who would not only be a caregiver to their child, but also a barrier against the outside world. This would create a basis of stability and normalcy, something that royal life tries, by its very nature, to undermine. People familiar with the employment process say the screening process was rather tough. We ran a background check on each of the candidates. It was a really thorough process. They looked at every aspect of their lives. Maria Barallo, on the other hand, provided what was beyond merely a perfect record show. She had an instinctive grasp of the unwritten rules that apply to royal families, and a quiet confidence which enabled her to flourish. Her natural understanding helped her to shine. In actuality, she was far from a starstruck individual. She was a smart expert who was about to take on the most arduous assignment of her whole professional career. She wanted to raise a king without risking his becoming a monster, and to care for a young child without ever forgetting the symbol he was meant to be. Her purpose was to bring up a king, and without exposing him to the threat of evil. She was more than a member of staff at Kensington Palace. She was the quiet protector of the monarchy's future generation. From the moment she walked into the nursery at Kensington Palace, it was evident that she was something more than anything. Others who knew the secret later stated that she had started her days in the pre-dawn solitude, roaming the palace chambers in practiced serenity. This was the information that was later given to them. She was a calming presence, a subtle murmur of normalcy in the midst of a world of formality and ritual. A young boy's laughter echoed through halls used to the quiet tread of courtiers. She fostered an environment where a little child could enjoy the freedom to just be a young boy. The kingdom of the city of mysteries. By definition, the connection between Maria and George was a phenomena of deep and personal intricacy. This was due of the nature of the link. By all accounts, William and Catherine were highly attentive and hands-on parents, yet their attendance was never guaranteed because of the rigorous schedule of a working royal. That was the case. They had a very hectic schedule. Events like his formal visits, state dinners, and innumerable charitable activities caused voids in the normal rhythm of family life. There were numerous reasons for these vacancies. It was Maria who'd put them in. She was there for everything from the very beginning, from the first skinned knee, the first tooth lost, the fevers that flared up in the middle of the night. She was quite present for all of these things. She was the steady hand and the soothing voice he could depend on while his parents shimmered on the other side of the world on a television screen. He could rely on her. The history of the royal dynasty around the world contains examples of this dynamic. Their formative years saw Queen Elizabeth II and her sister Margaret fiercely attached to their governess, Marion Crawfey Crawford, who played a significant part in developing their personalities. This is known. But they were mercilessly cast out of the royal circle after the publishing of a delicate and compassionate memoir called The Little Princesses. Prince Charles had a close bond with his nannies, Mabel Anderson and Helen Lightbody, who were hugely important to him over the years. He understood, too, that the attention they paid him gave him a warmth that his parents, who so often were not there for him, could not provide him. The contradiction is that these relationships are crucial for the mental well-being of the royal children, and at the same time they pose a threat to the bond that exists between the parents, and more critically they provide a threat to the safety of the institution. She's a vault of knowledge, the tantrums, the vulnerabilities, the unscripted familial dynamics that should never be shared to the wider public. She knows. Maria Barallo displayed a fantastic ability to negotiate this dangerous terrain. One of the former courtiers said she understood her role was to be the emotional scaffolding, not the building itself. She never intended to replace Catherine, but rather to augment and give a smooth continuity of care. She is shown to have schooled George in Spanish terminology using the original material, creating a private language that was wholly theirs. She called their special language a world of shared secrets and unvoiced understandings. Together, she and George created a world of shared secrets and unvoiced understandings. This seemingly small act of connection that occurred in the great and impersonal royal corridors of Kensington Palace provided a wonderful anchor. "Buenos dias, Maria," he would say with a grin, and it was a confirmation of the one-of-a-kind friendship that they enjoyed. This was a whole other universe of its own, contrasting to the formal titles and strict etiquette that had already begun to intrude on his existence. It was she who was able to discern his psychological state by studying even the most minute variations in the expression of his face. Also, she was the one who knew how to capture a real smile for an official birthday portrait by holding a favorite toy just out of frame. She had that gift. This moment of pure, spontaneous happiness was seen by the whole world, yet they could never understand it. It was not just his routine she was administering, but she was administering his spirit as well. A forecast cannot be of a disappearing. As Prince George got older, the shadow of his future became more and more apparent to him. It is a horrific process executed with cold, trained efficiency by the royal institution. The metamorphosis of a child from a carefree youngling to an aware heir is a process controlled by the royal institution. This meant that the days of playing with sticks in the grounds of the castle and reading storybooks by the fire were coming to an end. When he was 9 or 10 years old, the center of his life began to change, almost imperceptibly at first, from the nursery to the classroom, from emotional growth to constitutional instruction. This change of direction happened when he was at school. Over his academic career, this shift took place in a progressive manner. The source describes this change in both dramatic and subtle ways. George would often go to the library with his father, and they would spend hours looking at the maps of ancient explorers. It was something they did together. His mind began to see the importance of history and his own place in it, and he began to ask questions that were a little more serious. The art supplies Maria had laid out for him, the whole point of their afternoons in the past, were suddenly ignored without so much as a glance. Maria had spread them out for him. Each and every one of these situations, without exception, was a small and horrific preview of what would happen to Maria in the future. She had been trained as an expert in the early phases of childhood, but her duty was growing rapidly beyond the limits of her power. There was a very strong hint that the establishment was ready to welcome him in. The meeting that ultimately resulted in the end of her job was conducted with the greatest compassion and care. Yet it was, by any measure, an execution, according to statements from people familiar with the facts. William and Catherine, both products of the same system, were assigned the task of delivering the news. Their business was to give the news. They figured up a way to make it appear to be a planned progression, not a breakup. They stressed throughout the conversation that George was moving on to another part of his life. The educational demands that he was now expected to fulfill were of the greatest importance and would be overseen by a new team of professional tutors and consultants who were experts in history, governance, and constitutional law. He didn't need a nanny anymore. He needed a governor. There is a rite of passage that any person who is to become a monarch must pass through. The transition that Prince William himself underwent is quite analogous to the one that is being detailed here. He went from being looked after by his nannies to being taught by private tutors who prepared him for Eton and the career he would eventually have. But knowing why the system works doesn't minimize the emotional impact. Maria, who had given more than 10 years of her life in caring for just one child, could not have been more disappointed to hear this news. Her calm and dignified acceptance and her one query of, "When do I stop?" is shown in the source. In that one inquiry, she is communicating a world of pent-up sensations of emotion. On the other hand, the saddest thing of all was that misery was the result of her last meetings with George. The young prince was an intuitive and sensitive child, a child's scream for the impossible, a cry against a destiny that was being imposed on him. He is said to have said to Mom, "I don't want things to change." This is a cry against a future that is being decided for him. The third and last gift was a leather notepad with the words, "Thank you for being my first teacher," printed on it. It was more than just a thank you note. It was an acknowledgement of the part that she really played in the circumstance. She had taught him not only how to tie his shoes or write his letters the right way, but she had taught him the importance of kindness and empathy and how to deal with the confounding realities of his own existence. As she walked down the back stairs of Kensington Palace for the last time, she took with her a decade's worth of secrets. Besides, she was abandoning the only life she had ever known for the last 9 years. She knew the future king, knew that he was afraid of the dark, knew what he dreamt of, knew what he really thought of the gilded prison into which he'd been born. She was aware of all these things. Silence is a powerful weapon, just staying silent. It is possible that the subsequent events are the most extraordinary element in the life narrative of Maria Borrallo. On this occasion, she offered a lesson in power and obedience that shocked the palace, but not for the issue, but for it to be completely missing. This was because she played it. A disgruntled or simply opportunistic ex-royal family employee now has a niche and profit-making avenue at their disposal in the contemporary times. This category includes the televised interview, the tell-all book, and the slow and profitable leak of palace secrets to a media that is hungry for knowledge. The closeness of certain people to the crown allowed them to make careers for themselves. One example of this is Paul Burrell, Princess Diana's butler. There is huge money to be made by giving the public real, behind-the-scenes royal gossip, and the world's need for it is insatiable. This was how the offer was put to Maria Barallo. Soon after, she was given the opportunity to take up a new employment with another rich family in Belgravia. Norland College, which is recognized as the gateway for the world's most affluent, had given her this opportunity. This time, the result would have been a seamless transition, a continuation of the life she had gotten accustomed to living all along. She shook her head. Instead, she chose a solitary life in West London, in a modest cottage rented by the palace. Her method of living was so secluded that was almost like a monastery life. She opened up much of the touch to allow the quiet in. It was the first and the most violent gesture she had ever made in her life. Indeed, it was not long after her vacation that she refused to go back to work, and it was evident that her devotion to George was more than a job. It was a passion. She made this very obvious from the get-go. It was not something that could be easily replicated with another child or with another family in the same situation. It was a one-of-a-kind piece. The silence that she maintained was so loud it was deafening. Royal observers and public relations specialists concur with this statement, saying that this gesture of the highest discretion is of incalculable value to the monarchy in the long term. You can break an NDA, but you can't break a bond of real loyalty. After some thought, Maria Barallo decided that the best present she could give the child she had reared was to disappear, to go back to the shape of a ghost. This would guarantee that the boy's reminiscences of his boyhood would be his own, and would not be employed as a source of enjoyment for the general public, accessible to the general public. It would seem the palace may not have fully appreciated the nature of this bond and the vacuum which would be created by her absence. This is something that seems to have happened. 8 months after her formal departure, she got a phone call, which the source gives as an intriguing epilogue. Just when George was about to go on a huge public tour, a critical step in his apprenticeship to the royal family, the system was going wrong. The tour was due to take place in September. However, the new group of advisors were academically of extraordinary talent, but they had the intimate knowledge of the prince's anxieties and needs that Maria had. She had to be revived. She volunteered to help out for a week, and in a short, professional return to the fold, she did. Reconciliation was not supposed to be her coming home, but a medical process. She professionally went over his routines and travel requirements to make sure his public performance went off without a hitch, and did so with confidence. A man accosted her, a man taller than she was, and more reserved than he. The institutional need to formally distance had erased the intimacy that had formerly been there. But as she was leaving, he handed her a folded slip of paper. There was a sketch of a dog pinned to the wall, perhaps a misspelling of her own name, with the word Marta scrawled beneath it. The drawing was pinned to the wall. It was a private, final message, a child's way of saying farewell. It was a child's acknowledgement of an unshakable relationship, a quiet thank you that no official statement could ever communicate, and showed thanks in a way that no formal statement could ever express. These funds are being provided by the monarchy. It is not possible to find any evidence that Maria Barallo ever returned to the palace during her lifetime. There is no evidence to support this claim. In view of the fact that she has taken the decision to adapt her knowledge into a program that offers support to other nannies who are getting close to retirement age, she has made a decision that is not only praiseworthy, but also illuminating. Someone who has been through the unique emotional cost of giving one's entire life to children who are not one's own, and then being forced to leave after one's work is finished, is someone who understands, someone who has felt the unique emotional cost once they have experienced it. The person who is able to experience the feeling is the one who is responsible for this. The decision to live a life of service rather than one of stardom is one that she has taken. And she is of the opinion that subtle dignity is more important than dramatic revelation. She is the one who brought about the decision. As a consequence of the culmination of her story, the House of Windsor is confronted with a predicament that is among the most terrible in the world. As a result of their continuous efforts to professionalize the monarchy and educate a future king for his obligations, it is possible that they severed a vital emotional link at an earlier stage than they should have. Would it be possible for this to take place? Furthermore, the decision to release her was not only practical and strategic, but it was also rational because it was in conformity with established royal practice that had been passed down for a very long time. Nevertheless, it served as a frightening reminder that the monarchy is, at its core, a family, and that the existence of the monarchy is dependent on the emotional fortitude of the children who are confined within it. This was a sobering realization. When taking into account the specifics, this was an important factor that needed to be taken into consideration. Another item that Maria Barallo has left behind as her legacy is the well-adjusted young prince who is currently standing on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. However, this is not the only thing that she has left behind. In addition to that, she made a number of other items available to the next person. As a result of her silence, she has gained this knowledge, and the crown has also gained a crucial knowledge as a result of her silence. When it comes to monetary value, trust is the most valuable commodity in this day and age when there is constant exposure. Additionally, the most potent power is not found in what is said verbally, but rather in what is not expressed. The most efficient method of transmitting information is through the use of trust. She was the observer who did not speak, despite the fact that she was aware of all that was going on. She has gone above and beyond what any courtier or counselor could possibly aspire to accomplish in order to ensure the future of the monarch that she raised up. She has done this for the sake of an upcoming monarch. She was the one who maintained peaceful relations. In spite of the fact that her service was never officially terminated, it is highly likely that her job was terminated by the monarchy. The one and only thing that took place was that it transformed into a form that was more powerful, more restrained, and distinct from what it had been in the past. Thanks for viewing the video. What do you think about this? Let us know your thoughts and see you in a future video.